Good morning, friends. Today we are going to have a discussion and an interview with eminent economist, Marxist economist, Professor Prabhat Patnaik. He is Emeritus Professor in the Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, and he is a very familiar face to all of us. I welcome Professor Patnaik on behalf of all of us. Welcome, Professor. And my first question in this regard, as the beginning of this as interview, is that what is the left? It has always been critiqued by many people that left has no role to play in the political history of India. So, what is your take on it? Especially, this is very important in the upcoming state elections and in the concluded general election. So, can you have your opinion in this regard?
Irfan Habib has got a view which is quite different from the party's view.
Yeah,
true. Party's views is the old Comintern view. They say that there was the British, there was a freedom struggle led by Congress, and there was us. They talk about a threefold thing. Now you see, but I think it is very important to say that the left was a very important component of that freedom struggle. That freedom struggle was not only Gandhi.
Okay.
That freedom struggle was Bhagat Singh, that freedom struggle was left, that freedom struggle was the terrorists, that freedom struggle was also Gandhi. Okay. Even inside Congress there are a hell of a lot of left. Okay.
True. Yeah, I mean, socialist and early socialist and
no,
even in communist.
My
in fact,
father was in the Congress till 1946.
Okay.
So the point is that there were large numbers of communists inside the Congress. So we have to therefore say that actually there is an anti-imperialist struggle containing very many different streams. Okay. Now, if that is, we were also a very important stream within that. Okay. So the idea is that we have to establish hegemony. In other words, you're on Ramsey's money. That the idea is to establish hegemony, not to say that you fellows are no good. If you say you fellows are no good, nobody will listen to you. Then that's a completely negative, marginalizing. Okay, that probably made sense in the 1940s when you thought the world revolution was around the corner and you're going to lead a revolution. Okay, and that Gandhi and Nehru were preventing the revolution. But that is not the case now. There's no world revolution around the corner. There are fascists in power, and therefore the whole idea, to my mind, is to actually say that look, there are all these different streams, and emphasize the anti-imperialist struggle, and say that we are consistent anti-imperialists. Are you willing to come with us? And so on. And we establish our credentials before the people as the most consistent anti-imperialists, not as a different thing from all the others. And
okay. So in that sense, we are appropriating the kind.
That's right.
All right.
Chinese were much smarter. Mao Zedong appropriated Sun Yat-sen. Madame Sun Yat-sen was made into a member of the Communist Party and a vice president of People's Republic of China.
Why don't we then?
we never did that. We were always sectarian and ultra-left. Always. The left in India has always been. I'm talking about all segments of left, not just the Maoists and so on. But even the tradition, even today, but partly it comes out of the fact that you are not really in a position willingly to actually take leadership against the fascists.
Okay. So, what is actually then? As you were in the concluding session, you were something about kind of empirical kind of a thing. We need to actually sit with the reality or understand the reality of the empirics, and then we need to actually formulate or kind of respond, not formulate basically.
No, you see, the point is that that if you look at all these fellows, if you look at European left, European left is totally paralyzed. If you look at the Indian ultra-left, all these fellows, subaltern fellows and so on, they're all, in some sense, they're echoing imperialist historiography. Imperialist historiography says that what is this freedom struggle? You have a freedom struggle. You actually had, shall we say, some people rising up here, some people rising up there against some local landlord, against this, against that, betterment levy, and so they are fragmenting the freedom struggle, fragmenting people's consciousness, and then suggesting this fragmented consciousness is something which is the reality, that there was no overarching anti. Now, in a sense, the subalterns are saying the same thing, okay, but from a left perspective, okay. But I think it's important for us, and therefore, and the subalterns are saying this by deliberately attacking the leadership of the anti-colonial struggle and so on. But it is very important. Of course, we are not Gandhians, we are not Nehruvians. But on the other hand, I don't see why we should not say that yes, they were part of an anti-colonial struggle. We were part of an anti-colonial struggle. The people who ruled India were people who were congressmen, and look where they are now. But we remain anti-imperialist. Okay. But if we say then Nehru himself was a bogus man, in that case you are not drawing a distinction between Nehru and Manmohan Singh. Then you are underplaying neoliberalism.
Especially the influence of it on the later stages.
Yeah, but because Congress has been hijacked by a bunch of bureaucrats. What is Manmohan Singh? Was he a congressman?
No, he never been.
Never been. So they are hijacked by a bunch of bureaucrats who are actually World Bank types, and they come and take over a party. So we should be attacking them. We should be telling congressmen, how come you fellows who were supposed to be fighting supposed to have fought for freedom struggle, allow yourself to be taken over by a bunch of bureaucrats? We should be attacking the Congress from the perspective of the anti-colonial struggle.
Not from the current political kind
of
neoliberal.
No. Neoliberal is the perspective of the anti-colonial struggle. Neoliberal is colonial, imperialism. Okay. So it is imperialist globalization. We should be attacking the Congress from that perspective, but attacking the Congress in a way that is creative, in the sense so that some of them then say,
would have
come to us, or we can have some common understanding with, etc.
Okay.
So instead of intervening in the Congress, if you say, oh, you are bogus fellows, that's my feeling. I just.
So I think
you see, because I am passionately keen that the left in India must acquire hegemony over society as a whole. Now, you cannot acquire hegemony over society as a whole by saying, please, society as a whole, you tell us, you agree with social ownership of means of production, you agree with whatever dictatorial proletariat, then nobody is going to come with you. If you but you have to, acquiring hegemony is through, on the one hand, united front tactics of various kinds, and on the other, without compromising on your basic things, and at the same time acquiring hegemony also through transitional demands of various kinds. Okay.
So in that sense, for example, we have a constitution.
We tell Congress, or Lalu, tomorrow the Janata Parivar is coming together. What do you want to say? We know they are bogus.
Yeah.
But you just say you're bogus. In which case Modi is going to win. You have to have some notion of politics now. So the point is that we can say that, listen, we are very keen that we should have the following. Okay. Now that following cannot be nationalization of means of production. Nobody will listen to us. Okay. That following,
like a common minimum program or
something of that kind. Yeah. That's what, in the context in which I talk about is universal rights and so on. That okay. That suppose they say, we agree, okay, so we declare. Then when they back out, then we tell the people, you see, we are for this. Then more people will come to us, and that's the way.
It's a strategy or a kind of tactical
strategy. You see, because this is a non-losing strategy. Heads I win, tails you lose. Because if they come with you, fine, then the people are benefiting. If they don't come with you, then we are saying, listen, we are consistent with each other.
Okay. So in that sense,
that's
more tactical.
Yeah. And this is what.
So what about in that sense? We have in a little bit critical kind. Then we have a programmatic kind of the left, which is very programmatic
approach towards coming together with others with the objective of generally our ideas acquiring hegemony over society.
Okay.
As opposed to being pure and moral. Okay, that we don't touch anybody, we are pure, and then you become like
marginalized.
CPIML Liberation, SUC. There are lots and lots of parties in Bengal, or I'm sure in Kerala, who are very pure.
Very 2-3 members.
Yeah, exactly. Who are very pure.
But
that's
so in that context, I have a very different question. Basically, then the Ambedkarian kind of constitutional minimum. So, do the Indian left, especially the mainstream left, to actually emphasize more on constitutional minimum?
We can emphasize. You see, as long as we don't abandon our theory.
Okay.
In other words, my point is, if I say right to food, I'm not abandoning my theory.
Of course.
I'm not abandoning Marxism.
Correct.
So I don't see why. These are ways. So I every minute, when we say that Modi is violating constitution by having his ordinance Raj, then we are defending the constitution.
Correct.
But then if we say, this is a bourgeois constitution, we are not concerned with it, then Modi would say, there you see, they are also not concerned, why should we be concerned?
Correct. So that is actually a kind of, the sharpness we basically requires in that. For example, the Aam Aadmi Party and their agenda basically in the run of election, they had purely exactly kind of promises which is a constitutional promises. All the points which they were made, a constitutional promise. So that may be actually given them more legitimacy than the left in Delhi.
I agree.
Because I was actually trying to articulate in that fashion.
If you go to the people saying that, listen, we are for socialized ownership of means of production, how are they going to vote for you? Why should they? They don't understand. They have not read Marx. They are not great theorists. On the other hand, if we go to the people saying, okay, I gave an example of a common set of rights, but anything else that we are for, Aam Aadmi Party said we are getting rid of corruption. Okay, so you go with some concrete slogans which people understand, relate experientially to, and on the basis of that, then they come. And then when roadblocks come in the way of these related to the property relation, you mobilize people against those. Okay. You raise the level of people's consciousness by first starting from where they are, and then.
No, in that line only, I'm asking that when Aam Aadmi Party started their kind of propaganda, you even spoke about their moral sense, and they are actually in the moral sense. They are hitting on the moral sense, but they are actually not very coherent from the theoretical kind of, especially the rational sense. So
they have no theory.
Yeah, they have.
But you see, their problem precisely would be, as the problem of a lot of these, the best of them, that they would begin by this. It has an immediate appeal. You get into government, but then you don't know how to run the government, or then you don't know where to take people from there because there is nothing else.
Yes.
Okay, you find that capitalism comes in the way of your thing, of your slogan, of your thing. Either your slogans then or your whatever measures you put in practice become corrupted, become hollow. Okay, you may have an ombudsman, but he becomes corrupt. Okay, corruption continues. Or alternatively, you would have to then say that, listen, this is not enough having an ombudsman, we have to have a change in property relations. Okay. Now, if they say that, then they are moving left. Okay. If they don't say that, then they would, in fact, then a time would come, they would just become like an NGO. Or they themselves would become simply like Lalu, Mulayam and all these people.
So is it the current kind of, a lot of hustles happening in the Delhi, especially the Aam Aadmi, but is it a reflection in that theoretical lack of clarity? So program.
No, you see, I think a lot of personal things.
Rather than the theoretical.
But you see, listen, I mean, why is, okay, in Kerala there are personal things between PS and others and so on. But nonetheless, they stick together. Why? Because there is a certain overarching theory, there is a certain overall understanding of imperialism, of, etc., etc. But if you don't have any of it, in that case it becomes purely moral. Who is better? I am better or he is better? Okay. In which case you just split. That's the problem with the socialists as well. Okay. They have continuously split. Because there is no sense of theory. You see, in Marxism, strategy and tactics are not independent of theory, they are actually a development of theory. Okay, yeah. While in all these other things, strategy and tactics are independent. There is no theory, there is no overarching theory.
I have actually now, as part of this is all kind of preliminary kind of thing. So I have something to ask about can you speak about your early formation of political understanding, which is actually very vague in the Sayers and Aristoteles book, which you have written yourself.
So, my father was actually joined the freedom struggle. He joined it in the late 20s. He participated in the salt satyagraha. He gave up college to join Gandhi's non-cooperation movement. Then he was in jail. Then after some time, when those who had left college and were in jail, they had given up the education halfway. So Gandhi had started 4 Vidyapeeths. Kashi Vidyapith was one of them. So a lot of Gujarat Vidyapith was. So a lot of them who actually had been in jail giving up their studies, they went to complete their education in Kashi Vidyapith, but of a different kind, not the traditional Macaulay type education. So in Kashi Vidyapith, Acharya Narendra Dev was the principal. Okay. But that was a place where there was a lot of socialists and communists used to come. It was a center of left thinking. So that's where my father came in contact with left thinking. And he and one of my uncles who were together, they decided to, first of all, they decided to join the Congress Socialist Party. So my father was the first chairman of the Orissa Congress Socialist Party. And then they secretly decided to make contact with the communists. And then they went to Calcutta, where they met Muzaffar Ahmad underground.
Okay.
And in 1936, my father was one of the founder members of the Orissa Communist Party. 3 of them became members in 1936. Extreme secrecy. It took them 6 months to actually meet Muzaffar Ahmad. So anyway, so that was the thing. So I was brought up in great poverty. Okay, great poverty. My father never earned a penny. But on the other hand, from my childhood, in an atmosphere of discussions, debate, Korean War, Churchill, things of that kind. So it was intellectually very rich and rewarding, but materially extremely poor. But on the other hand, all of us brothers, we got scholarships here and there, so we went and studied and so on. So we actually came up that way.
How many brothers?
We are altogether 6. Altogether, including me, that is. But 2 of them are dead.
Okay.
So
Now 4?
Now 4, yeah. So that was the way it was. But on the other hand, from the very beginning, there was an exposure to communism. But on the other hand, there's no theoretical understanding or anything, just an exposure. But then the understanding I developed in college, I used to have teachers. Matthew Kurian was one of them, who's from Kerala. And then I had
the earlier
Matthew Kurian. So then, who started the Journal Social Scientist and so on. He was a Rajya Sabha member of the CPIM for 6 years. So Matthew was one of them. Then there were other teachers. So theory I started getting at that point of time. Okay. Then I got a scholarship, Rhodes Scholarship to go to Oxford. And that's where we did intensive studying of Marxist classics.
That has happened in Oxford.
All together. I mean, Lukács or Althusser and reading Marx's German ideology or whatever, Capital and so on. Because before that in Delhi we had just read little bits, maybe Sweezy, at least Marxian Economics we had some exposure to. But Marxism as a whole, something that happened only when I went abroad.
Okay. So what about the influence of, say you were talking in that book many scholars like Amartya Sen, then Subramanian Chakravarti.
They were all very progressive people.
And Kane Raj, in fact.
They introduced us to Marxian ideas, to left ideas, not so much to Marxist theory, to left ideas of various kinds. And they were the best economists in the country. So everybody who was any good was left. Okay, there are different shades of left. And some would be Nehruvian, some would be Marxist, and so on. But there are different shades of left. So it was very natural to gravitate to the left, and within left, then it was natural to try and come to terms with Marxism. Marxian economics we had to do anyway, but then also you can't understand Marxian economics without understanding Marxist philosophy and so on. So that's how one slowly got into the whole thing.
Once I was reading the D-School Days that publishing. So in that somebody, I'm not exactly remembering, said you were a very shy student while you were in St. Stephen's. Somebody was referring, I think Kaushik or somebody.
Yeah.
So then from there you have actually moved a long way to. So
But
what was actually of course.
I mean, in sense that, listen, I came from a provincial background, I came from a poor background. I had great intellectual confidence that I had, but on the other hand, I didn't have the social kind of smartness, So and St. Stephen's was full of people who were socially very smart. On the other hand, St. Stephen's was a very interesting college. It had a lot of leftists. It's a Christian college, but a lot of leftists on the staff, and
It's from Kerala.
lots of from Kerala or from Bengal also. So a lot of people from the left and very brilliant people, very bright people. I was quite fortunate being exposed to so many bright people, and who are also very committed to the left. They were not commodities. They were not trying promotion. They were committed to left ideas. It mattered to them that I read a book. It mattered to them, you see. So that we are very lucky. I think ideas were taken very seriously. In a way, they are not now.
Similarly, you were talking about the influence of developmental economics, especially which was developing and became very prominent
in Oxford. There was a lot of you see.
Calder. Not even Calder.
That is before. No, not even Calder. But that basically at some point the World Bank hijacked development economics. Development economics began as a part of left and particularly Marxian economics. Paul Baran, political economy of growth and so on. Political
and his
economy
book is in that sense a very
exactly very important. It had we read Paul Baran when I was 17 years old in second year BA honors. So the thing is that or even other books which may not be Marxist but very radical, very left. Like European Social Democracy, Ragnar Nertze, and so on. He's not a communist, but they all belong to the European Social Democratic stream. Then we read Oscar Lange, we read Kaleski and so on. So the thing is that development economics was all this. Development economics actually emphasized the need in third world countries both to confront imperialism and to carry out structural reforms inside the country, like land reforms and so on, in order to release energies and productive forces to confront imperialism. That is where development economics was at that time. Then at some point there was a counter-revolution in development economics.
But why that counter-revolution basically?
World Bank financed, World Bank. I think the initial period of enthusiasm for the Nehruvian strategy wore off. Okay.
Especially in 60s or
yes,
late 60s?
Well, in the 60s. Firstly, land reforms had been limited. Poverty continued, inequality continued. In other words, the Nehruvian strategy did not represent a sufficient break with the past that would have allowed an alternative development scenario. China at that time represented an alternative scenario right until the 70s, after which Deng Xiaoping and others took over. But the thing is that in India, while at a political level it was quite interesting because we had political democracy, freedom of discussion and so on, at the economic level there was insufficient structural break. There was build-up in the industry and so on and so forth. But fundamentally on the land reforms question, on the agrarian question, there was an insufficient break. As a result, poverty continued, and if poverty continued, then it gave a chance to the World Bank and so on to come in and say that, listen, all this doesn't work. Okay. Look at South Korea, because it is true that that time capital was beginning to internationally flow. Okay.
Especially concentrating in South Korea,
East Asia at that time. And in other words, the post-war mobility of capital meant that in particular pockets you could have development. So it became very, and these are small countries. If you have 8% growth rate in South Korea, where there's a very small population, then it's possible it can have an impact on poverty, as opposed to India, where you have crores of people. So they actually projected this whole idea that all this doesn't work, but on the other hand, if you create conditions where capital can flow into your country, look at South Korea, Singapore, and so on, then you would be able to get
later Malaysia and all came to that.
Malaysia, Indonesia, etc. Not that poverty has disappeared, in fact you have to be very careful, but on the other hand, an impression was created. That strategy is no good nowadays. That impression was built upon to give rise to neoliberalism. Okay.
So that is actually the onset of neoliberalism.
Yeah. In India, the Nehruvian strategy or thinking along those lines held on for a much longer period. But in other countries, it disappeared much faster.
Okay. So then coming to, it's actually something on the Chinese issue. Like especially in 50s, Mao. Prof Patnaik has actually written something on that disappearing of population.
I know her argument is that this whole, you see.
So is it a propaganda of that neoliberal?
Absolutely. Not just neoliberal, it is a propaganda. You see, it's a propaganda to discredit the Maoist strategy. The point is that everybody talks about 30 million famine deaths. Okay. Her point is that this gives the impression that actually 30 million people died. That's not the case. What happens is that, that suppose 10 people die. Then you say these 10 people would have produced 30 people. Okay, that way. So a lot of the 30 million deaths are actually deaths of unborn people. Okay.
Because of the other policy changes.
No. You see,
or the demographic dividend.
Because nothing. Okay. It's a pure statistical thing. Namely, that you count. You see that you count over a certain period. Some people die. Then, in calculating the total number of deaths, you count the number of people they would have otherwise given birth to.
Okay.
You see what I mean?
Which is a very tricky kind.
It's the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Because it gives the impression as if 30 million people died. But 30 million, if someone says 30 million people died, then the impression everybody gets is that 30 million people standing who dropped dead. But that's not it. The smaller number of people died. Some people died, but a small number of people died. But this 30 million is an addition of all those who would have been born to those small number, who are not actually born because they died, and they are also counted as dead.
Are you? Okay. But still, that story is going on. Even last week I was listening.
That story is going
on. Our own CP, the Rajya Sabha member.
CP Narayan?
He was actually telling the same story in that sense.
He's got it wrong.
So I would actually wish to correct.
You should send him such paper. But on the other hand, some international, her idea has been picked up in quite a few international Chinese study circles.
Okay. So that was actually, okay.
But you see, this is the point. The propaganda is intense. Even our people fall victims to this propaganda.
We also actually kind of carry forward what they want to actually. So now I would like to actually add a little bit on what you have written over the 40 years. We were talking about the dynamics of the mixed economy.
You see, my original idea, that was my PhD thesis and so on also, was to show what are the contradictions of the mixed economy. why does a mixed economy, as in India, why does it move towards capitalism? Okay. Kaleski had argued that it can continue. Okay. But in India, we know that it moved towards capitalism. Why did that happen? In a sense, it's a critique of the Nehruvian kind of thesis, or Nehruvian kind of model. And that was my first thing. What are the contradictions in a mixed economy which surface over a period of time? That was the first topic that interested me. I've always been interested in the labor theory of value and Marxian theory of value and prices in particular. And I've always been interested in macroeconomics. That's my basic area. Okay, in which I'm also quite fascinated by the Keynesian Kaleskian revolution. Because even though Keynes was a bourgeois economist, the fact of the matter is that it is an insight. It is actually a theoretical revolution. There is no
alternative.
I believe that these ideas were there in Marx.
Correct.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, Marx, I believe, was the first person who carried out, I mean, in a sense, Marx carried out two theoretical revolutions. One is the revolution taking over from Ricardo about the theory of surplus value, how capitalism came into being, labor power as a commodity and so on. The other is anticipating the Keynesian revolution. But then Marxists never discuss the second one.
Yeah.
So Marxists always discuss the first one, which is why there is, which is why Marx's contribution in that sphere has been completely underestimated, which is what I mentioned in this value of money.
Yeah.
Okay. The real revolution begins with Marx. The real Keynesian revolution begins with Marx. Okay. Not in capital so much, in theories of surplus value, critique, contribution to
criticable
economy and so on. So that is the other area. But then the area which has always interested me, following from all this, is imperialism. Okay. Following from the Marxist theory, following from this interest in macroeconomics, the area has interested me is imperialism. Then I wrote my first big book, Accumulation and Stability, based on that, where I was basically arguing that imperialism is essential for the stability of capitalism. And then I wrote this, more or less developing the same argument, but saying that that in fact a monetary economy, which capitalism is completely unsustainable unless you can make sure that there is no rise in prices of commodities, and that in turn is something which requires. Part of it was to show that any monetary theory that is not taking into account stability in the prices or some prices, a Walrasian monetary theory, let us say, where everything including the value of money is determined by demand and supply, is logically not tenable. Therefore, a monetary economy must have some fixed prices. But if you are going to have fixed prices, how do you have fixed prices? Okay, one way of having fixed prices is to have a group of people whose incomes can be squeezed. Okay, that is.
There in this.
That was there in the accumulation of stability, but then I carry it forward here because link it much more to monetary theory. That's what we also develop in this theory of imperialism, which is further development of this.
That is actually, the second question of mine regarding this one. The influence of Kaleski from Keynes to influence of Marx, and how we actually,
You see,
the link between.
I think whether you take Marx or Kaleski or Keynes and so on, there is this whole business about recognizing the issue of aggregate demand. Okay, Keynes and Kaleski, their strength lay in they rejected Say's law. So did Marx. Okay, once you have rejected Say's law, what do you say or do? Okay, I bring in imperialism there. You see that if you have rejected Say's law, in that case, how come that capitalism still has grown so rapidly? Because if it is the case that capitalism as a system doesn't have full employment, doesn't even have high enough employment, it can be stuck anywhere, then how come it hasn't been stuck in stagnation? How come you have dynamism in capitalism? That's where I bring in the whole imperialism question.
Okay, which is basically connected with
this. In other words, it's a step beyond. You see, Keynes, after all, doesn't talk of imperialism. Even Kaleski doesn't talk of imperialism.
Yeah.
Marx talks about it only in his writings on colonialism, but not in Capital. So much, okay. So, but on the other hand, I believe that the Marx-Keynes Kaleskian revolution gives me an opening to bring in imperialism.
But we can see that in the Lenin's work of imperialism.
But you see, no, Lenin's
it's a very
imperialism-
different way. But
No, Lenin's imperialism is really about monopoly capitalism. Okay?
which
But-
is an 19th
Well,
century
in other
phenomenon.
words, he uses the term imperialism to describe only one phase of capitalist dominance of the world. That phase is built upon colonialism. Lenin talks about colonialism, but on the other hand doesn't analyze colonialism. Why was there colonialism? Okay. I think Rosa Luxemburg talks more about it, but fundamentally it is that which constitutes my subsequent interest.
Okay, especially like this accumulation of capital.
In other words, I mean, their whole, you're talking on, I'm talking on influences, I mean,
Yeah,
exactly.
basically.
I mean, it's not as if I'm simply saying what Kaleski said or what Lenin said and so on, but you go through life, you read a lot of things, then you develop your own ideas. So the things which influence me.
Yeah. Then now I would move to rather your joining of CESP and kind of so the 40 years which you spent with.
Yeah.
So how the basically the people like Krishna Bharadwaj and
You see, Krishna Bharadwaj.
she
brought
made
us.
herself,
She brought us.
Oh.
Krishna Bharadwaj was, as you know, worked on the Strafa system. She was very close to Strafa. She used to come to Cambridge regularly, to Clare Hall. I was a fellow of Clare College. So Krishna Bharadwaj would meet us and then become friends and so on. And then she said, why don't you come to India? We never had any ideas of settling down in England. We had this idea of coming back to India. But this gave us an opportunity, an opening when you are being asked by someone who she was starting this center, she was setting it up, so she says, you come. Amit Bharudi was going to be there, who was an outstanding economist, Krishna was going to be there, so we felt tempted and it was a good opening. New university we came. You see, but JNU is very important to know that JNU was formed as an anti-imperialist university. You see, you cannot have a JNU now. JNU was formed in that period when Indira Gandhi was confronting American imperialism, Bangladesh war,
Yes.
and so on, when
In the late 60s.
late 60s, early 70s, when she was left, she actually put all kinds of left people to build JNU, Munis Raza,
Yeah.
G. Parsasarathi and so on, okay. And in the faculty and so on, okay, so Biman Chandra, etc. So she put a lot of leftists there, and what is more, it was an institution which self-consciously saw itself as being independent of imperialist hegemony. That way Krishna and Amit in economics. Krishna Bharadwaj was a follower of Strafa. She was not neoclassical economics. Okay. And Strafa was a friend of Gramsci. Strafa was a Marxist. So because of all that, it was a very different thing. In today's world, you cannot have a university like JNU because immediately they'll put some neoliberal fellow as vice chancellor. Okay.
Or somebody visionless.
Somebody visionless, exactly. Yeah, some bureaucratic, etc.
So
and not only therefore, because it was set up by left people, not only was it the case that it was theoretically anti-imperialist, but it had a vibrant student movement. No teacher felt threatened by the student movement. Okay. In fact, G. Parsasarathi was gherraud by Prakash Karat and all these people. One whole night, G. Parsasarathi, as you know, was a friend of Sundaraya. They were roommates, and G. Parsasarathi at one point was a member of the Communist Party. So he was gherraud. He didn't call the police. He was gherraud for a whole night. Gherraud got lifted, he went home. So it was a very different thing. You don't have such people now. You don't have such ideas now. So we were quite fortunate that at the time we were trying to come back from England, there was this. coinciding with Indira Gandhi's anti-imperialist phase.
I mean, again, kind of CSP. How the faculty who basically Amit and then Sunandas and then Anjan and all actually contributed in the development of the center, basically in that line.
There was a sense of a mission. We really felt there was something fantastic we were doing, and the very idea that we were not just giving out second-hand the theories developed in the West, but we were doing our own thing. I think this business about developing your own syllabus, giving out your own ideas, your own teaching, marking the script, setting question papers, etc. All this was very good, because then you are not obliged to follow some American syllabus.
Which we do now.
Which we do now, you see, but that did not have. I mean, Amit Bhaduri used to teach macroeconomics, and his thing is that textbook he has written.
Yeah.
In fact, so much so that Amit Bhaduri, after his first year of teaching, first semester, whatever, they're all semester courses, someone told him, "Sir, but you haven't taught us quantity theory of money." So Amit Bhaduri said, "But why should I teach you quantity theory of money? It's all wrong, based on a confusion between stocks and flows." So he was under no compulsion to teach quantity theory of money. Because also we were producing economists not from the market, in other words, we were not producing commodities. We were producing people who thought. So Chandru, Sitaram, Jayati, they're all products of that period.
Yeah, but she's from sociology, Jayati.
No, she was our student. She did her MA in economics. She did her BA honors in sociology.
Oh, that might.
But then she came and did economics MA. She's my student directly.
Okay. Then she moved to Cambridge. Cambridge.
She got a scholarship. She was registered under me for a PhD, but she got a scholarship then to give me.
All right. So now, it is today's kind of question and related with it. What does actually, how the imperialist agenda sponsors the politics of Narendra Modi in that sense? It is actually, and the BJP, and how far it makes the restriction between Congress. So that is actually.
The point is that imperialist agenda likes neoliberalism, wants neoliberalism. Now, so the whole, just look at it this way. The Congress, we were discussing it a moment ago, the Congress party is not a neoliberal party. You see,
anti-colonial kind.
Okay, they are confused, they don't understand economics, whatever. So what does Sonia Gandhi understand? But the point is that a bunch of neoliberals took over the Congress party. Okay. Now, I think Modi has taken over the RSS. Okay. In other words, Modi himself may not understand, but he is a corporate man. Okay. He is a corporate man with a neoliberal agenda suggested to him and financed by the corporates. His election was financed by the corporates, but he has taken over the RSS. RSS itself doesn't understand. It's not particularly neoliberal. What do they understand of neoliberalism? So I think what imperialism does is that it takes over traditional political parties, and it takes them over by imposing upon them. Partly because, listen, I was talking about Derek Keyes, okay, the South African finance minister. You have to have someone in the RBI in whom the global financial community has confidence, otherwise there will be outflow of money. So you got hold of some Raghuram Rajan. Raghuram Rajan is not Congress, and the same fellow continues even when there is Modi. He is not Modi, he is not RSS, but you see, there's a kind of detachment where the economic decision making is increasingly put in the hands of a bunch of financial bureaucrats trained, supported by the World Bank and such like institutions, by imperialist institutions. Then they get placed on top of political parties. Okay. And the political parties, because they can't cope with this situation, they all accept it because they have no other agenda, no other understanding, which is why the left must have. Okay. Now the point is that the Congress, however, okay, but how do you win elections? Okay.
Yeah.
To some extent, of course, if all parties have this kind of an agenda, then it doesn't matter. But that's not enough. You have to appeal to the people about something. The Congress had this, that, there would be neoliberalism, but we will give you MGNREGS. Okay. Now, when the crisis hit the Indian economy, and by crisis I mean something very specific, namely peasants and laborers were suffering anyway. The middle class now begins to feel worried because jobs are not growing as rapidly. Growth rate is coming down. The middle class was doing quite well from neoliberalism. Then they tell the middle class that the crisis is because of this Sonia Gandhi, because of MGNREGS. Okay. Therefore, they say that a hardened neoliberalism is the answer. But hardened neoliberalism, middle class may actually buy, but then the others are not going to buy. So then you say communal fascism. That, okay, you Muzaffarnagar riot. So Muzaffarnagar riot, you organize, and then you get 20-30 seats out of that, etc. So a combination of a corporate financial oligarchy-driven regime and program, which then rides on the backs of communal fascism. And that is where the RSS comes in, because they like all this. They don't understand neoliberalism, but they understand all this.
Communal fascism.
Yeah, because that is their objective. So you have this merger of the two.
That is what actually they are
That
playing
is
the strategy.
it's basically a corporate communal axis, which is currently ruling the country.
So it has nothing to do with in that sense.
But you see, the one implication of that is that if there's a corporate communal axis ruling the country, then, and they are squeezing out all these MGNREGS and so on, when they get into difficulty, either they would have to move further right, in other words, actually become authoritarian and fascist, or alternatively, they would have to abandon power, lose power, but if they lose power, it can only be, in other words, they have reached the end of that kind of route. It can only be to an alternative formation that is actually championing people's rights against neoliberalism.
Okay. So,
in other words, the combination of neoliberalism with MGNREGS is something which is not going to come back in the same way.
yeah, now it is maybe I think a little tricky way of putting. So, as a classical Marxist, can you explain the changes on 21st century, basically,
basically
adherent politics on 21st century?
No, basically, I believe that the entire communist movement was based on a certain understanding. That understanding was that, which Lenin discussed in Imperialism, that from now on, inter-imperialist rivalry and therefore wars emerging out of that are going to be the prevalent phenomenon. That being the case, we have now reached the era of revolutions. In fact, Lenin said that monopoly capitalism is the eve of social revolution, and that what had happened in Russia is now going to spread to China, to India, and so on. So so the whole communist movement was formed on the assumption that world revolution is imminent. It's going to happen. It's going to happen soon. Okay. I think a basic change took place, and that change consists in the fact that actually at the formation of international finance capital, that inter-imperialist rivalries became muted, became much more subdued. Now, if inter-imperialist rivalries become muted, then the prospects of that kind of a war, where Americans are at the throat of whatever, Germans and so on, that recedes to the background. Then imperialist powers can come together. If they come together, then the kind of social crisis that had made revolutions imminent no longer exists. Which means that oppression exists, much worse. But on the other hand, revolutionary transformation possibilities become much more difficult, okay, because they are united. And if that is the case, then the communist movement, which is formed on the basis of the assumption that a revolutionary situation is imminent, world revolution imminent, has to rethink its strategy. That is not what we have done. I believe the direction of rethinking has to be, firstly, we have to accept that this business about, that defend bourgeois democracy, okay, defend whatever rights people have got in this particular period. So the communists must emerge as the champions of democracy, as the champions of welfare, as the champions of what I was calling anti-imperialist inclusive nationalism. And that way they would be able to establish their hegemony over society as a whole, because these ideas appeal to many people rather than simply that we are going to capture power and nationalize the means of production. Okay, that was okay when you're in the midst of a war. Okay, but on the other hand, not in the midst of a war, So I believe, and if that is the case, then the communist movement also must open itself up. We were discussing earlier, hegemony. Then you have to accept that this Sonia Gandhi is not going to disappear. That Lalu Yadav is not going to disappear. They are going to be part of this economy's of this political landscape. Then you have to relate to them. Okay, that's what I mean. So you cannot just say only we communists are going to capture power and make things better for people, because you can't.
So do you, in that sense, is it something looks like the dictatorship of the proletariat in that sense is now would have been given more emphasis on the deepening democracy kind of thing, because that would be translated. It is a very different vocabulary basically.
But you see, I am not talking about dictatorship. The proletariat have no problem with, because if by dictatorship, what is a bourgeois democracy is we have to distinguish between the nature of the state and the form of government. Bourgeois democracy can be the form of government, but the nature of that state is the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie. Okay. So I would use the word dictatorship of the proletariat in that sense, or not proletariat so much immediately, but a state of workers and peasants, because peasants are very important. So or what Lenin had called a people's democratic dictatorship of workers and peasants, or
Worker Peasant Alliance.
That's right, as a means of realizing a dictatorship, a democratic dictatorship of workers and peasants. Okay. But that's the form of the state. The form of the government, as the nature of the state, has to be authentic democracy. There is no conflict between dictatorship of the workers and peasants as a class dictatorship and the form of the government, which is a democratic form of government, just as the bourgeoisie runs a class state but based on universal adult franchise, based on democratic form of government. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I understand. But how this is in that sense, it's a very kind of challenging task. So what is actually the preconditions to develop?
I believe that is the way that Marxism has always seen the problem. It is just the fact that in a particular, but I do not. You see, the real distinction is not between democracy and dictatorship of the proletariat, dictatorship of workers and peasants. There's no difference there. Real distinction is that dictatorship of workers and peasants is not the same as dictatorship of the Communist Party. Okay. In other words,
yeah, I understand. The larger sense, it would be reflecting
the problem with the Soviet Union is that the dictatorship of the proletariat became dictatorship of the party. That's wrong.
Even Chinese case.
Everywhere. That's wrong.
So that means
party
it becomes a
cannot
structure.
Substitute for the class.
Okay, that means it becomes by itself reiterate as a
That's
structure.
Right. It becomes a structure independent of the class.
Okay, which is exactly the earlier kind of.
Then it alienates the class.
Yes.
Then the class gets depoliticized. When the Soviet Union collapsed, there was no workers' strike. Why?
Because workers were alienated.
Exactly. It is amazing. The world's first workers' state collapses, and the workers don't have a one-day strike even.
So in that sense, actually, it is fascinating to look back again Marx in that sense,
but
the manifesto of the communists.
I don't believe either Marx or Lenin ever visualized a situation where the dictatorship of the proletariat gets reduced to dictatorship of the party. Never. Marx certainly never, not even Lenin.
Because the idea of the workers and all in a party is very different in that sense. Of course,
party is a vanguard. It brings theory to the workers.
Correct.
But the agency is the workers.
Correct.
Party doesn't substitute for the workers.
So worker in that sense not necessary. Is it actually necessary to have the industrial workers? Not necessary.
Marx generally saw a large category of people. I mean,
The peasant.
not so much peasant, because peasants are petty proprietors, but all kinds of workers, including garment workers, for instance, would be workers.
The unorganized sectors,
Unorganized
for example.
sectors, exactly.
Because 90% of the labor force is.
They are all workers.
Okay. So in that sense, it's not actually a factory worker per se,
Because
basically.
in Marxist time, there was hardly much trade union organization anyway. So when he's talking about the working class, he's not talking only of the unionized workers.
All right. So that is pretty. Now, in the Left in Decline and subsequent reflections, many discussions were actually, developed. And what is actually the real crisis of Indian left in that sense? Even if there is a crisis, I don't understand, the crisis, whether the crisis is very impending or it is already happening.
I think I would say, there are two problems with the Indian left. One problem is that it has been, it's a very peculiar combination. It has been quite sectarian. Okay, I do believe, that we have been discussing all that. It does not own up the anti-imperialist legacy of itself as a part of the broad struggle. It actually says our struggle was different from yours.
Yeah,
okay. So
by itself it alienates from...
It alienates itself from that broad anti-imperialist struggle that the people of the country were engaged in, which the bourgeoisie led. That's not the Congress is a bourgeois party, so it's a party headed by the bourgeoisie. Bourgeoisie led the struggle, but the fact that we were a part of that struggle, though we could not assert our leadership, that's not the way that it sees that struggle. Okay, I think towards the end, people like B.T. Randive and so on had begun to look at it the way I'm suggesting, but not in much of the communist literature in the country. Even EMS says there were three forces: the British, the Congress, and us. All right, so that's one thing. Namely, I think it has been in a very peculiar sense sectarian, and always therefore visualized not a process of acquiring hegemony over the popular movement, but visualized exclusive leadership. In other words, you ask anybody, they would say that their notion of the future is a party dictatorship.
Okay.
You see, that's wrong.
That's wrong.
That's wrong. That in other words, the other thing which actually happened is that they got hegemonized by a lot of bourgeois ideas. Okay.
Rather the worker or the other kind of thing.
They got hegemonized by a lot of bourgeois ideas because what is this Bengal?
True.
Okay, what is Nandigram? That whole idea is that we have to development in quotes, the agenda of development captured them. Okay.
The thing which is actually currently the government proposed, or even
that's right.
Exactly the kind of
GDP. We were taking GDP 7% growth rate. Are you aware that in 2006 elections, one of the things in the LDF manifesto is that we want to achieve 8% growth rate or 7%? What is this? Is that what a communist party says? So, but you see, these two are not mutually exclusive. Look at the Chinese Communist Party. Chinese Communist Party believes in dictatorship of the party, but Chinese Communist Party believes entirely in this GDP kind of thing. It doesn't believe in,
the egalitarian.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. So these two can go together. This has been the problem of the communist parties everywhere. Even we fell into that trap.
But in that,
and I think we fell into that trap because of the Chinese success.
But in that line, if, for example, many had, not many had.
We wouldn't have fallen into that trap if China didn't have this high growth rate.
Okay.
I've been in the party for years. Our party was wonderful. In fact, no, but it begins to do this. Party, of course, always believed in dictatorship of the party, even though people like M. Basapunne and so on used to say that I believe in socialism, but there will be multi-party democracy. MB used to say that. But anyway, party could have been open to that kind of thing. It was a wonderful party. But the point is that at some point, this whole Chinese 8%, 10% growth rate began to affect us.
It's an illusion which
began to affect us, particularly Bengal, which is very close to China. So it began.
It's a geographical
and a lot of historically also Bengal has always been influenced by China.
Because of the
Mao, cultural revolution, everything. So because of that, the pull of the Southeast Asian thing is stronger in Bengal. So when the Chinese started doing it, then Bengal started doing it. Let's also have 7-8% growth rate in this.
But in what way we can actually
Salim Group and things like that.
Okay, Salim and all actually.
Salim Group, Bengal, they call Salim Group.
Okay, so what we in that sense, look at this Syriza you were talking today. And can they actually be really an alternative in that? In the Latin American kind of?
Because they are confused, no?
Yeah.
Because, Syriza to be an alternative, firstly, let's be very clear, Greece is a small country. Greece cannot stand on its own, okay? Cuba did, but enormous sacrifices. In other words, today you tell the Greeks that you make all these sacrifices, so they will get winning. So, but the point is that I think Greece together with Spain, if they actually were serious, they would be setting up a bigger thing which could somehow stand on its own. Or negotiating with Iran, negotiating with China, negotiating with BRICS Bank and so on. They are doing no such thing. Syriza, I believe, as of now, is not going to last very long. Okay. People would get this. It will become like the Labour Party. Okay.
Of Britain.
Or like the Greek Socialist Party.
Right. But in Greek, KKD is there, right? The Communist Party.
They are very sectarian. They are completely sectarian.
Sectarian?
Completely.
Okay.
They are very, very sectarian.
Many of our friends, of course, and they used to take up KKD very seriously. Thanks Syriza in many lines.
No. You see, Syriza, who's going to vote for KKP? Okay, KKD. Who's going to vote for them? They are like our fellows who, only we are right. Everybody else is wrong. Okay. Those days are gone. People would just laugh at you. People would, suppose tomorrow in Kerala or in India, Sitaram Yechuri stands and says, everybody is revisionist. We alone are right. Who will take you seriously? Who will vote for you? Then it will just become. So, KKD, unless it actually changes its strategy and tactics, is not.
It cannot be actually.
They are right they are right in their criticism of Syriza.
Okay.
Absolutely. The Syriza Syriza's problem is on the one hand is saying anti-austerity, very good. But on the other hand, you see, unlike all the others, socialists and all those others, all of whom are pro-austerity, it is anti-austerity. So it has not become revisionist. It has not betrayed the people. But you cannot be anti-austerity without at the same, while negotiating with the German banks, okay, you can negotiate immediately desperate, but you can't believe the German banks are going to kind of
give you.
Exactly. That's Syriza's problem.
Okay. So in that line, what does actually make the difference of the Latin American kind of, especially Maduro or?
No, but Latin America, firstly, Latin America's advantage now this is not, but they had oil. They had oil,
Okay.
Maduro had oil, Bolivia had oil, Ecuador has oil, but now with oil prices fallen, they are having difficulty.
Okay, so in that sense, they are also going to be hit.
Because they are having a lot of difficulty. If they can withstand this, then that is fine, but otherwise, it's going to be difficult.
So, one more.
Greece has nothing.
Okay.
No, Greece has only tourism, let us say.
So of course, I want to actually ask final one. So, what is actually this take on?
We should be
What is the take on this corruption, which is a very structural corruption? That is
corruption is
bureaucratic kind of corruption.
No, you see,
in that sense.
My point is, people are talking about crony capitalism. All capitalism is crony
It's
capitalism.
crony.
There is no capitalism which is not
Without-
crony capitalism. So that, corruption is a part of capitalism. It's particularly a part of neoliberal capitalism, because in neoliberal capitalism, primitive accumulation is taking place. It is, it's so isolating corruption from capitalism is theoretically wrong. Okay. Now, this is something which we have to keep arguing, which is not the same as saying that we have nothing to do with anti-corruption movements. No. We say that we are against corruption, but you fellows don't understand this corruption is much deeper. Okay.
Okay. So what is actually in that? Of course.
You see, corruption arises on the one hand because of extreme commoditization. Everything is a commodity. Okay. I mean, you see, everything. There is every. The moment, for instance, suppose I come here. Instead of saying what I believe in, if I say something else, that is a form of corruption. And why do I say it? Because then I may get some posting in Delhi, I may get something, etc. So if I do that, that's corruption. You see, so the moment I make myself into a commodity, I am in some sense becoming, in quotes, corrupt, because corruption is a more moral term. Corruption is a moral term. That's why I don't even like the use of the word corruption. It's not a Marxist term, it's a moral term. What is called corruption as a moral term, from a Marxist point of view, is decomposable into a number of things. One is commoditization, the other is primitive accumulation of capital and so on.
All right. So then one last point, this is okay. What actually of course, I'm believing in the left tradition. What is the kind of things which, in praxis, we can carry forward for strengthening the left?
To my mind, at this moment, is very important for strengthening the left. One cannot strengthen the left. Put it this way. Suppose I say it's daytime. Suppose the party says no, it's night, and if I say yes, it's night, then I'm not strengthening the party. I have to tell them it's daytime. So I think see, Communist Party is not a conspiracy. It's a movement. It's for a revolution. I think that's based on truth. So I think it's very important now for all of us to tell the party the truth. Do you see what I mean? It's not a conspiracy. It's not some kind of an arrangement that You want to change society. You want to end oppression. You want to end exploitation. You want to build a completely new world, the like of which has never existed in human history. If that is the case, then you don't do that by accommodating and
all sort of
exactly. So I think it's going to be a bit of a long struggle, but I think
if we genuinely kind.
I am very optimistic, because after all, oppression and exploitation has reached a level which I think people are not going to tolerate very long. Okay. I believe this current world capitalist crisis is going to continue. It's going to disillusion the Indian middle class with all this neoliberalism. There is going to be a radical revival. When that radical revival takes place, I think it will also be a revival of the left. And if the left at that moment, on the basis of a genuine respect for the movement, but attempting to establish hegemony of his theory over time, not by sectarian relates to that movement, I think we have a great future.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you very much.